The agenda, there was a misprint. We don't have board reorganization as indicated on what we received in our packets, so we can move on to the consent agenda. Maybe we'll separate out first previous minutes. Any questions, concerns, changes, alterations to the previous minutes?
But I read them and they look fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we can maybe have a motion to accept the previous minutes.
I'll move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to the policies. Lynn, these are all first readings, correct? On
Correct.
these? And NMV, we went over all of these at our last, it looked like to me.
Yes, because the timing was after the first.
Right. Okay, and at the NMV meeting, there were some issues related to the alcohol and drug and substance use on school property. Did we need to revisit any of those that we
Those have been-
hashed out last
Those have
time?
major. There were
Okay.
a couple of little tweaks that you asked me to make that would substantially change
Right,
the context of
Okay.
it. Just some wording. I have copies of where F16P stands now, if you want me to pass those around. Just make sure
I
this-
did have a question if I can find it.
You do have a question.
On one of them, I can't remember which one it is though.
For those of you on the Enosburg Richford board, you will appreciate that I found those about 5 minutes after the board meeting. They were in my other bag. You know what it takes.
Oh yes, I did have a question. Here's my only question, and maybe there's some policy. Can I ask my question?
yes, yeah, of course.
In section D, infraction of drug and alcohol use policy and school response policy infraction, it says a few times, under A, policy infraction, at the end of the first little paragraph, it says, or alcohol or any substance representing drugs or alcohol on school property, including buses, or at any school-sponsored activity at home or abroad. Oh, any school sponsors activity abroad. I was like, what's abroad mean?
So if we were to take a group of students to France, the drinking age was 18, we had 18-year-old students, they still would not be allowed to drink.
Okay,
That's the way I would interpret that.
okay. I needed some clarification, and I think to read it out loud.
Or to Canada, to a senior class trip.
Yeah.
to
Yeah, okay.
Six Flags.
Gotcha.
So I was like, okay, wrong.
I was like, abroad?
So Lynn, are these aligned? I have the packet, I have the one that we went over at NMV, and then the one you just handed around, but they are the same, correct?
This had the slight corrections that, you know, we have to go back into designated.
Okay.
I think there were 2 words.
Okay.
Yeah.
Literally the 2 words that you asked us from the NMV feedback to change.
Okay.
It was like, and instead of between.
Right, right.
Yeah.
They were really
Like that.
minor,
Yeah, it was-
largely grammatical, not content.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so any other questions or discussion on on the other policies other than the alcohol and drug substance use one?
That's my only one.
Okay, so, we'll need a motion then to accept the first reading on all those policies.
I'll make that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great. No, no reports in this, can skip over that, okay. So moving on, visitors. Hello,
Hi, Representative Lisa Hango.
And Representative Sharon Fagari.
Just
welcome.
listening.
Just listening?
Thank you.
Okay, absolutely, nice to see you both.
Lisa, Representative Hango, I can almost see you have a different hat on than when I normally am spending an evening with you.
Great. Okay, so, moving on then, central office updates. Dominic. You're up.
Okay. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be working with principals from Bakersfield and Montgomery, looking at candidates for the open IT position for those two towns. I think we have 6 candidates there.
Oh, that's so
Nice.
exciting.
Yeah, so we're hoping to meet up tomorrow, or maybe it'll be electronically by distance, but we'll go through the candidates tomorrow and hopefully getting some interviews scheduled soon. So that's pretty exciting. It did look like there are at least a couple pretty strong candidates in there.
Awesome.
That was good. And another thing, at the last meeting, I talked a little bit about the SLDS and the big data submission that we had to do over the summer. And thinking back to last year, I think just for myself, my estimate was I put in somewhere around 3 months into data submissions, just the state data submissions. And that doesn't include time for that Morgan and Jamie and Doreen put in helping with some of that too. So thankfully, the AOE has contracted with Power School to hire Power School. So they've built Vermont State Reporting into Power School now. So it'll be, some work on our end to make some changes about how we enter things and the way things are tracked, but almost all of the data is there. So that should be a big help moving forward. And I had meetings with our registrars last week to start looking at the new screens that have been added in and the new things that we'll have to start tracking on students. And then the idea is that once everything's there and entered the right way, that we should be able to just do a few clicks and have that export the data that we need to submit. So should be a huge time saver once we get there. So
Great,
I guess that's it for me.
great.
Great, thank you.
I got a question. Have you had a chance to look at the data you put in to see if it is accurate, what they're using for, what's the,
He's
Snapshot.
talking about the snapshot.
yeah,
So there's been some accessibility issues with us being able to get in consistently to view that, so we haven't dug yet.
Okay.
Double check that data.
All right.
I promise you it's on our list.
okay, perfect.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen it at all.
Okay, great. Jody.
Right. So speaking of the snapshot, so last month, I talked with you about the snapshot, which is our new public accountability tool, and a little bit about the integrated field review progress for monitoring the implementation of ed quality standards from the Agency of Ed. But tonight, Lynn asked me to talk about curriculum assessment and instruction and how data informs continuous improvement and professional learning as well. So just a reminder that the curriculum team has shifted a little bit. So I'm the Director of Instruction and Learning. I also have acted as the Humanities Content Specialist in the SU. We have Mary Ellis and Jennifer Kennison, who are both not exactly full-time, either one of them. Jennifer's actually 2 days a week, and she has been our science and STEM content specialist, and then Mary is a math content specialist. So that is what's going on with the curriculum team. So our priorities and our work plan for this year are centered around having vertically aligned K-12 priority standards and learning scales that go with those that help to evaluate students. And then the KUD framework by course or unit. KUD stands for Know, Understand, and Do, and it's a curriculum planning framework. So we also are developing those by the unit at the elementary level, and right now by the course at the high school level. And the purpose of this is to really have a focused, multi-tiered system of support with highly effective universal instruction. So that first instruction for all kids is what we are really focusing on this year. And we also do want to have a transparent and clearly communicated guaranteed viable curriculum. That is not something in the past that stakeholders have been able to see readily because our curriculum development was done in a password protected environment. And so we are creating tools so that that will be out available to anyone who would like to see it, grade by grade, content by content. You guys, parents, community members, anyone who would like to see it can see it. So we're hoping to have that up and ready to go by later this spring. And just a reminder about MTSS. So if you've been in education for a while, you may have seen the pyramid model representation of MTSS, which stands for multi-tiered systems of support. Really, the state of Vermont is looking at it more from a layered or leveled perspective. They're releasing a new field guide soon that has it more as a layered or leveled model. And so this is kind of a representation of what that looks like. So you have your universal instruction, which is all students. And you'll notice that there are a couple of layers there that are aimed at that universal instruction. The second one goes to students who need a little more time and instruction with their teachers to get at those grade level standards. And then some students may need some targeted instruction, which really is going out of grade level to backfill and catch up on things that they have misconceptions about. And then you get into the targeted and the level 5, which is really an adapted, a modified curriculum. So this is what that priority standards work is really aimed at, that first instruction this year. So again, the multi-year plan looks like this. You'll see all the things that are in green are aimed at that first instruction, that universal instruction for all students. And so you'll see over the 3 years, it really stays mostly focused on the green. This year is all green. Next year, we also will turn our attention with the teachers to targeted instruction as well, to that the kids who need to go out of grade level to do the catching up, the backfill aspect of it. So we also do needs-based professional learning. So we know that the research says that for professional learning, the best model is sustained and job-embedded professional learning. And the way that we approach that is the teachers have an academy model. So they meet as content grade level teams across the SU, and the special educators meet as a special education group. And they have, all the teachers have 6 or 7 sessions this year that are spread out throughout the year. So that's the sustained piece. And they really are engaging in work around the content that they're teaching. And so that's the job embedded piece of it. So some of those sessions are part of SU in-service. We have one of those coming up a week from yesterday. And those are the 80-minute sessions. And then every grade level and content group has 2 or 3 full-day sessions as well. The special educators have also spread out sessions that are more of like a half-day model throughout the year. But all, again, aligned at that same idea of multi-tiered systems of support and the universal design piece. And then the administrators also have a leadership team model. So we have a 4-day institute in the summer, and we have monthly full-day sessions throughout the year. And that is based on the comprehensive needs assessment that we do. And we did one a couple of years ago to build a multi-year continuous improvement plan. And we really took a data walk into very comprehensive data sets, not only academic proficiency, SBAC, type data, but also things like attendance and truancy, graduation rates, how our kids are doing on things like the SAT or AP tests. We looked at different types of data about behavior and social emotional learning. So that's what our comprehensive needs assessment was, and out of that came the continuous improvement plan, and out of the continuous improvement plan came our needs-based professional learning model. So for new teachers, they, in addition to what you just saw on the last slide, they also have, if they're a K-5 teacher, they have a program orientation day in June where they get to know the math and literacy programs that they use. The pre-K through 8 new teachers who were not responsive classroom trained had a responsive classroom course in June, which is classroom management. And then we have a 2-day new teacher orientation in August. The new teachers all have a mentor who's a master teacher who is an expert in pedagogy, so in how to teach. And she works with the teachers by observing them and then debriefing with them. And I know she sees all of them at least once a month and some more frequently. And then every new teacher also has a go-to person in their building, and that's for more kind of nuts and bolts things that are more building specific. And there are ongoing classroom management trainings as well that Lynn has helped to organize. So again, our continuous improvement plan came from that comprehensive needs assessment, and that's something that gets revisited as new data comes out. So all professional learning is tied to the goals and the change ideas in the continuous improvement plan. And the continuous improvement plan gets reviewed and revised as we get new data coming out. So speaking of new data, we have some new SBAC data for literacy and math. This data does not include Sheldon because they weren't part of our SU when they were tested. And the results are fairly consistent. I'm about to show you some charts that show comparison of our SU to the state averages. We have made some nice gains in math this year, which is nice. And we do have some grade 3 results that are a little bit of an anomaly. They did go down, but that's not something that we've had in the past. It's not a trend with the 3rd grade. So it's absolutely something that we need to be watching, but it's not something that is representative of what has happened in the past 5 years. So these are our SBAC literacy results from this spring. And you can see the far right column, the areas in red, we are lower than the state average, and the areas in green, we are higher than the state average. And these are our math results. So in December, there will be new data uploaded into the snapshot, which I showed you last month, which is available online. And this will be represented in the snapshot for the SU.
You don't happen to have last year's data right there, do you?
Say it again?
You don't happen to have last year's data right there, do you?
I do, but not in this slideshow.
That's
But
fine.
I
To compare ourselves to
I could
ourselves.
access it.
Yeah.
I could send you a summary. So on these slides, do you see how there's a data point for each grade that's tested for literacy and math?
Yeah.
We saw gains in the majority of those from last year to this year. So I could get that for you,
I have
for
it,
sure.
actually.
Okay,
And I'll just pass.
great.
So you're gonna look in the change column, and the change will represent last year's data.
Okay.
So you'll see, oops, can I go back a second, describe? You'll see where it has the school's name that represents this year's data, and the change is whether or not that's a decrease or an increase from last year's data.
Okay.
So for example, Bakersfield 3rd grade, 47, that's a decrease from 67 last year.
Wait,
And the same
At
grade.
the very top.
Same grade.
Right.
So grade 3
Yeah.
last year, grade 3 this
Right.
year. Okay.
Yeah, which is actually a different group of kids.
Class,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
wait, you're saying it's, did you say 67?
Yeah, down
Right,
20.
it went down 20.
Oh, I see, so I got you.
So that
I
change
got you.
represents how does this year's data compare
Yeah.
to last year's data.
Okay, I got you.
It's so weird.
I know.
That anomaly is so weird. You wonder if like,
That was the state of Vermont.
oh, was it?
Trend.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, and so the curriculum directors that I work with are going to engage in some inquiry
Yeah.
about if something about the actual assessment changed.
Right. If
Because
the
it's
question-
unusual to see
Right.
that kind of a
That's
drop for a
significant.
grade level
Yeah.
statewide.
Or it's planetary alignment. It's one or the other.
Well, it reminds me of, we used to have students do faculty evaluations on paper with fill in the bubbles, right? And I
Yep.
had one adult student come back to me in a panic because he realized after doing a second faculty member that he had tanked a faculty
Oh,
member.
did a ones
used
instead of bunch
yeah,
or something?
he
The
said, I
wrong
misread.
bubbles.
Can I please have my paper back? So that makes you think like, did they just all get the instructions wrong? Like,
Yes.
Is
Yes, so
the
that,
first year that, the third grade is the first year they do the SBAC, right?
yes.
So some of it could just be that it's new and unfamiliar? Do
Well,
they
we've
ha-
typically had strong results for third grade.
Okay.
So that's, when I say this is an anomaly, I
Right.
mean, we typically have strong
Yeah.
results for
Huh.
third grade.
But
So
it's statewide.
It definitely bears watching.
yeah.
And to look, this is fresh data. That's the other thing that I need you to know. This is like new. We have not had the chance to go back and crosswalk with our other data sources
Yeah.
to take a look and see what they tell us, and if there are any insights there.
And these are this year's fourth graders.
Yes.
So it'll be
the-
important to see how see whether it was just an anomaly or it's something about content and curriculum that somehow isn't aligning with what is
Exactly.
presenting on those exams.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is from the administration. The kids took this in late April and May.
Right.
And so, yeah, our next step for sure is to go in and take a look at the other data sources that we have and also do that inquiry piece out.
What?
Looks like a lot of the third graders in Vermont had a difficult time. So an example of a change idea for a continuous improvement plan, we had one for academic proficiency that had to do with increasing the equity of instructional time for literacy and math, and that was based on, looking at this type of data and taking a look at where we were getting data that didn't make sense and coming up with a change idea to see if we could impact academic proficiency out of it. So that was all that I had for curriculum and data and needs-based professional learning for today, unless you have questions.
Oh, I did have a question on, I just wondered about all the professional development that we're doing with the faculty and now the Sheldon faculty, how that is comparative, like how they're taking it and how it was before and more or less it's the same or?
We have maybe more that are cross-SU team times than they had in the past. And actually, it's going pretty well because they came from a system that had priority standards, KUD charts, and proficiency scales.
Oh, good.
So we are also working on priority standards. So interestingly, what the Sheldon teachers did at their first session was to take a look at what are the FNESU priority standards, what are their former, the Sheldon priority standards that they're working with, where are they exactly the same? Where were they very similar but with slightly different wording? And what priority standards does Franklin Northeast have that they did not, or which ones did they have? So they're crosswalking essentially. And also just aligning some of the titles of their KUD charts and whatnot. So the process has been really nicely similar, which has been nice
Good.
because we have a common language.
Right.
So that's been beneficial. And that really will help us take a look at, so what will the alignment plan be? What needs to be aligned and what might the time frame look like? But it's also helping, them to wrap their minds around where we're similar, which is, we've found a great deal of consistency with the priority standards, not
That's
surprisingly.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
Great, thanks, Judy. Michelle.
All right. So I had 18 staff members just finish up with Wilson training for 3 days, and that was very well received. Some people are even going to be getting a 1 credit. So they're gonna get 1 credit for it, and the Wilson training is around literacy and specifically is targeted reading instruction. So there were interventionists, paraprofessionals, and special educators that were involved in this from a couple people from every school in our district. So that was really exciting. And now my work to move forward here is during the academy days that Jody was talking about, is to provide professional development around learning profiles. And now now that we have a student's learning profile, how do I connect it to a program that meets those students' needs? And then one of my academy days is going to be with a lawyer to talk about procedures of special ed law and to make sure that we're following procedures correctly. Another exciting thing happening is Crystal Godbelt, who is one of our BCBAs, is going to start offering parent groups, and she wants to link families together. And she's going to offer some different topics around communication, so helping children communicate appropriately. She's going to offer another parent night about behavior support, things like toilet training, compassion fatigue, so like how to take care of yourself when you have maybe a child who's needy. She wants to invite other professionals like SLPs and occupational therapists to come to the evening just to give their tricks to families. And she's going to start in November, and we're going to invite maybe National Honor Society or high school students to offer childcare as community service hours and provide snacks. That Jody's helped us get that organized. And we're thinking we're going to probably do it here in the library, kind of central to like Bakersfield and Sheldon. And so we're working on that, so that's coming. Then the third thing I want to talk to you about is Morgan and I have been working on service plan and budget. More Morgan with me supervising from the back. But I'm not sure how familiar you are with Act 173, but it's the new funding model that the state has, it's based on a census model, or the number of students that we have in our schools, instead of the reimbursement model, and it's basically creating a separation of general ed and special ed allowable costs. So recently we received 2 independent schools like information on what the breakdown would be on general ed versus special ed, and it's roughly a 40 to 50% regular ed tuition cost, which if potentially could have an impact on local budgets. However, several state level organizational groups have sought legal counsel around this because they have concerns about whether it supports or violates federal law. So it's kind of up in the air, but just want to give you a heads up that this, depending how this turns out, it could impact our local budgets. I'll let you two maybe add some more.
I'm going to add a little bit here. So currently, we have a reimbursement model for special education. So you write a plan, you identify the services you're going to provide the students, you provide the services, and then we get reimbursement for providing those services. The Act 173 shifts that away from a reimbursement model to a block grant. So you're going to get a fixed amount of money. There's some questions that are bubbling to the surface about, everybody knows the intent of the law and to provide you greater flexibility to match the students' needs with the right people in your building, in or outside of special education. However, there is one part of 173 that has people pretty worried. So right now, if we have a student who we send to Project SOAR or Laraway or Bell Kate, we don't have a general ed cost associated with that student. So with this law, they're saying we're going to require you to pull out a general ed cost and associate it with that student. And that could be, what did you learn? Probably 40 to 50%.
Yeah, 40 to 50%.
And some of these are extremely high cost placements, and we generally are getting reimbursement at a pretty high level for those placements. So it's going to be a significant shift. If all that checks out and it is legal to do that, then it's going to be a significant shift in the cost, what it's going to actually cost us. You want to tag in here?
Sure. So we just finished up the service plan today. we've got around $500,000 in tuition for kids to go to a Project SOAR or Belkate or programs like that. So if this is held up, that would mean $250,000 would come out of the special ed budget, would not be reimbursed, and that would in some form go to your 2 local budgets. Either would go directly, or we would still allocate it from the SU level, but we'd be allocating the full amount, not the, after the state kicks in 90% of those extraordinary costs. So it's potentially a big hit. I was at a meeting on Friday when one of the representatives of your organization, School Boards Association, sort of put in no uncertain terms that they were going to pursue legal action with AOE if this interpretation continues. There are a couple of other conversations that we're having in the office about, what this might look like down the road. We don't know if they're going to come forward and say, okay, for that $80,000 tuition bill to Belkate, $40,000 of that's regular ed, but we're also spending maybe $20,000 to transport that kid there. Is that all going to be now local costs because we're transporting other kids to their regular education
And we're
placement?
aware of what 2 schools have backed out for regular ed costs. That's not taking into account several other schools that don't have that
Right.
information in yet. Therefore, we're basing the 40 to 50% on the 2 that Michelle and I are aware of. It could be that the other schools are more like 50, 60, 65, 70%. So I would say that those figures are fairly loose at this point, since we only have 2.
The other issue that we've been talking about is that if it's a Bakersfield kid, let's say, going to Belkate, right now you as the NMV board don't ever get to see any information with that kid tied with that placement. Now you have to establish residency for kids that you're paying regular ed high school tuition to. Do we give you a tuition bill that says Belkate regular education, Morgan Jr. on there? We're going to say it's regular ed, so you haven't identified them, but clearly those are the only kids that are going to those placements. So I think a lot of this was not ready for prime time on the AOE's part. We are moving forward with the service plan as if it's going to go away. Next month, when you see your first look at the budget, we'll probably act a little more conservatively and say, okay, if it does happen this year, where are we going to sort of back out some of the anticipated revenue from the state so that you're not caught holding the bag?
So I have some questions, just to make sure I have my thinking right. So are they basing that some of that money's coming out of the regular ed because they assume like 40% of their education is regular education?
So far, those percentages have come from the schools themselves.
Oh, okay.
They've gone to them and say, okay, what's regular ed, what's special ed? 2 of the placements that we normally use have given them a figure. The other ones have not yet. So they're also trying to figure that out. If there's a placement that hasn't given them any data, what number do they use?
Right, so the state's not figuring out, like, I'm almost thinking as far as like, when you think about Medicaid.
Right.
I'm actually thinking like health insurance, right, or like, Medicaid, you'd bill this and you'd maybe give back half, 40%, right? And so that they would say, these are the services we pay for, and this is what we'll pay for them. Is it kind of the same, saying like, this is how much we'll pay for these special education services, and this is how much we're allotting you, and the rest has to come out of the general fund? Is it kind of?
They haven't described it that way.
But
What they're
that's-
trying to describe is that every child has a right to a general ed expenditure.
Okay, right, I see.
There's
But then
really
they're
no
saying like, this is
clarity.
how much, this is how much we're gonna pay for an out of placement. So they're not being that clear.
No.
No,
we're-
okay.
And it's not
So-
even clear how they're coming up with the figures.
With the figure,
To be quite
okay.
honest, or at least
Absolutely.
I haven't been able to analyze, summarize, whatever comprehension strategy you would need to use in
Right.
this.
They're kind of in a rule-making process right now, and they have
Okay.
an advisory council with stakeholders from several different areas of education. But this is supposed to be primetime live next year, at least a portion of it. So it is interesting to conceptualize
okay.
as we're building a budget and not have answers around some of those things.
So what,
And-
I just need what's special ed? What is the definition of special education?
So, do you wanna do this one? Or do you want me to? So a child who has a disability,
Okay.
and there are 3 gates they have to get through. So there has to be an adverse effect on their education, the disability has to cause an adverse effect. There has to be a discrepancy. You describe it.
So you have to have a disability, and there's a list of disabilities, that's gate 1.
Okay.
Gate 2 is that disability has to have an adverse effect on their performance in class.
In a
And-
particular basic skill area.
Right, so reading fluency, math, calculation, math problem solving, writing expression. And then you have to be in need of some sort of specialized instruction.
Okay. So how do they determine your overall block grant?
That's what I was wondering.
So there's a weighting study happening now. I don't think I can clearly define that.
Some
Like,
kind of weird
there's- it's-
formula.
But
no.
I mean, they can't do it. I mean, they have to do it on a district by district basis, right? Or
They're
no?
doing it, they're basing it on your census, really, but then there's a
Right,
weighting
number.
study, like,
It's like a per
you know how we weight ADM?
Yep.
Certain students count a different portion,
right.
like, there will be some factor, happening around the weighting work.
So are they taking like income data and that kind of stuff into that formulation, or this is just purely?
The poverty level
Yeah.
study.
Yeah.
It is not clear to me yet how
Okay.
that block grant is going to, I don't know if you guys have gotten more
No.
information than I have.
There are so many unknowns that it's very difficult for me, at least, to articulate this, and I think many of our colleagues around the state would agree. On Friday, we engaged in a conversation around how much and what do we let boards know at this point, because there is potential for huge implications for budget. But unfortunately, a lot of these questions that you guys are asking, we're asking without clarity, without getting information. So I feel good about the fact that we can say, honey, here's plan A, and here's plan B if we've gotta back some out. Like, I feel like with the information we've been given by 2 schools, we can sort of, you know, come up with some other figures for other schools based on what their numbers are, that, you know, we have a lot of that information, but it's really,
I get-
it's pretty.
So how do these other schools come up with these numbers?
It's, good question, good question.
Not really rules that we're clearly aware of, that, I'm sure there's some guidance, but. So the moral of the story is, we wanted to tip you that stuff is going on around Act 173 because we really hadn't done any type of formal work with the boards yet around Act 173. Just to give you a perspective, people that are working with this more intimately than I am have said that this will make Act 46 seem small.
I was gonna say,
Oh.
here we go again. That's exactly the feeling I had when you're like, we don't know, we're gonna figure it out. They haven't told us anything. I'm like, here we go again.
Be a little PTSD.
And the driving force behind this is federal dollars drying up, and it's the downstream effect then on state
They want
available.
more flexibility is what it is intended to do. And quite honestly, I think it feels like it's more restrictive in the special ed world. So
So
it's
it-
almost contradicting, sort of.
There's some foundational stuff behind it that is not wrong.
So
There's
right,
some,
which was-
the intent behind this law was right. So you could have a child that has a disability in reading. And if you're a special educator, if she's, you know, Joe special educator, she's required to specialize in all content areas, right? So she might not have the most intensive professional training herself around reading. But because that child has an IEP, you only get reimbursed for services if she is the one that's providing the services for that child. We may have a literacy interventionist who has a much better match for that child and could provide more intensive intervention. But we cannot get reimbursement for the services that an interventionist would use. We still could do it, but it wouldn't be an approved.
It's not specialized
Right.
instruction, so it goes back to when you asked about special ed, and these ladies were describing the 3 gates. So if you're in need of special ed, you're basically needing supports that are above and beyond what's available to all students, and oftentimes that interventionist is available to work with all students. So that's why there's a little bit of restriction on the who for purposes of reimbursement.
So this would give us that flexibility to say, you can spend the money to meet the needs of the IEP. However, you could use that interventionist if that was the right person to support that child.
So it could potentially be beneficial for the kids that are in our school district, but it's the children that we are sent. You're saying that the higher dollar, more expensive children that are going to Laraway and the other programs, that's where we're going to really feel budgetary wise the pinch, because they're being reimbursed at $80,000 a year costs. Yeah.
We're trying to tip you to, there's a lot of angst about how we're going to be able to back out regular ed costs.
Right.
For those students who are in those alternative placements. I don't wanna pass judgment on all of it because there's just so much unknown.
Yeah.
I don't wanna be fearful of what 173 is going to mean to us, but at the same time, I want us to be, to use a common sense approach for when we know this, what's the impact on our budget, we need to plan for it. And I also wanted you to have information because I sense that your organization may be reaching out to you. And when you see Act 173, I don't want you to say, like, I don't know what that is. I want you to be able to have this kind of level of background information so you can tune in to what you may be hearing down the road from your organization.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you've seen the fiscal implications on the more of the out of placement or out of district students, and just being mindful that, we wanna make sure that we're meeting kids' needs and that if we get to the table where there's a discussion, it's not like, well, we don't wanna do that because there's a huge fiscal implication. So really being mindful that, because you're seeing what this is kind of causing for questions. So, if we've got a student that we're struggling to meet the needs and we're looking for that sort of restrictive placement to meet their needs, we don't wanna have to have some barriers around, well, we can't do that because, so that's where some of the legal implications are coming in, just to give you a sense of sort of where some of the people from our seats are kind of seeing some things.
Yeah, I'd say the issues, two things on the issues specific to tuition. One of them is that it's really more that this act has highlighted the fact that we've all been counting these tuition rates as entirely special ed reimbursable because a kid wouldn't be at that placement if they weren't special ed eligible. And they're, with Act 173, they're starting to look at some of their longstanding rules and saying, well, that doesn't look right to us. And I don't think it's coincidental that my understanding is the block grant is going to be tied to a couple years of past history of special ed expenditures. And so if they get the last year that they're calculating down because they've moved a bunch to regular ed, the amount that you're getting in the block grant going forward would be less, and that would be statewide.
So are they linking it to dollar amount or number of students that are receiving those services?
I think they're doing both.
Okay. So it actually, it probably won't, but the total block grant, even if we have to do it this way, depending on how they formulate the dollars that are going into that block grant, we could be okay
If they wait.
In the long run,
in the long run, right?
it could be.
Okay.
We'll go with that.
We'll go with it.
But it's hard to predict when you have a new student coming into a school or into the district that needs a much higher level of services. And then you have a block grant and
just dealing with it.
it's fixed in place.
Exactly.
Right.
So your $100,000 child that comes in, that's a lot out of a fixed set block grant.
Right.
Because it's no longer child specific.
Right.
It's like having 10 high schoolers move in over the course of the summer.
And you have to go grocery shopping. On a fixed income. There you go.
Okay. Never a dull moment down there in Montpelier.
And they just moved offices. So.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, sorry, Heather.
Can you come back to Heather because I'm supposed to.
Be
How about we
You're
put-
doing,
Yeah, but I
Okay.
need to retrieve it.
right,
So
she's
we
not
didn't do
here.
introductions to start with, and we have a new administrator at our table today.
Oh,
Do you
okay,
wanna
apologies
introduce
for that, yeah.
Oh, sure.
I'm Dawn Reed, I'm the food service director for the SU. So I worked at Montgomery prior to coming up to the SU and just kind of getting things squared away, getting menus under control, and we've got a review coming up in December, so I'm working on that. I took the job July 1st, we had a summer review and we aced our summer review. I'm hoping to do that for our December one, but time will tell. We'll see. We're trying.
Great.
So do you know the other board members? Do you know the board membership? Maybe you could
I
just
know
introduce.
Mary and I know Rick and
Polly.
Polly.
Yeah.
And I'm Jean Marie Clark from Bakersfield.
Hi.
Kevin
no-
Lane from Richford.
And I seen Kevin.
Can I ask a question and buy you some time, Lynn?
Sure.
Um,
I'm there.
So I wonder, this is just my own little personal quickie thing, but like, so now that you're in place, is it like Taco Tuesday across the SU? Like, is that how, or is it?
What
I mean-
I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do it so that all schools run really close to the same menu.
Yeah,
Guidelines are so different between a K through 5 school and then you've got a 6 through 8
oh,
and then you've
okay,
got a
gotcha,
9
yeah,
through 12.
right,
So it's just putting different things into the menu to make it work for a high school menu. For the most part, I'm trying to run it where they're all running the same.
yeah,
There is some flexibility because my opinion has always been that if we have I'm gonna use a ski day as an example, and I'm gonna use Montgomery, because obviously I know their ski days always fall on a Friday.
yeah,
So my feeling has always been in a K through 8 school, when you have 4 through 8 already going for ski day, where does it make sense to take and run 2 separate menus that day? So I'm kind of putting it so that we can have a day where it's a sandwich day, so that anybody can throw that into whatever day of the week their ski day or their field trip is, because I think that we should be doing the same meal for everybody. So it might not necessarily be like if we have an Enosburg kid visiting a Berkshire kid in a week of a ski week, that Enosburg kid may potentially end up having the same meal 2 days in that week
oh, I gotcha, yeah,
because of
Yeah.
the flexibility.
Yeah.
But it seems to be that tacos seem to be a huge hit. The tacos, the fajitas, the nacho, the burrito type.
well, I was just thinking about
Seems to be-
efficiency wise, like, is that part of what you're doing is making this master menu and master ordering, and so thus it does become Taco Tuesday for everybody. And I'm not complaining, I'm just curious, that's all, yeah.
Yeah,
Not-
it is, and a lot of it is what we all have is commodities.
Right,
I
right,
mean, I've been in tune with the commodities. I've helped most of the schools order the commodities from each year.
yeah,
So I kind of know we all kind of go for the same commodities. So that's a big commodity that we get.
yeah.
And so that's why it's just one of those that we kind of use, and, you know,
Yeah.
it's a lot of stuff and it takes long to get kids through on Tuesdays. But I also look at it and I think if I was to pull that out weekly,
Mutiny.
you know, yeah.
Yeah.
It really, it's the simple things.
Yeah, yeah, for
So-
sure.
Exactly.
Well, I speak as a board member from a school who benefited from your help when we were in a bind, and I'm really grateful to have someone like yourself who's really taking the bull by the horns and making sure that all of our schools run smoothly. I appreciate that. Okay, back to our regular scheduled programming.
So Heather, I think Kevin, was tonight the open house?
Richford.
Oh, it was tonight? I couldn't remember. It was
Heather, I
Richford,
wanted to
right?
say that's where she was, but I want to make sure I have it right tonight. If that's where she was.
Yeah, I think that's all it is.
So she wanted to set up a table in Richford and be there for that open house, so. She wanted you to know that both Enosburg Middle High School and Richford Junior Senior High School LEAPS programs have each been awarded $1,000 from the STEM Challenge Initiative to help interested high school students prepare STEM experiments to be presented at the MVU STEM Fair this winter. So the MVU STEM Fair coordinator, Richard Ballard, will assist FNESU science teachers with coaching students. The hope is that next year FNESU and MVUSD, and maybe other supervisory unions will be able to work together to form a Northeastern Vermont or Franklin County STEM fair. This opportunity will allow FNESU teachers and students to experience a high-quality STEM fair before considering whether or not to spend energy to organize a local one. So the NVU STEM fair began as an after-school program when Heather was the coordinator there. It started with only 30 participants and now has over 100. Several students every year go on to the state fair, and several MVU students have received college scholarships because of their projects. She says she looks forward to seeing this kind of recognition and opportunity for the youth in FNESU. So it's an
Cool.
exciting opportunity. She's like a grant wizard.
She is a great
She
girl.
is.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
She's great. I'm gonna share some stuff with you later in my board report about stuff she's gonna be helping us with.
Nice.
Great. Jamie?
I don't have too much of an update for you. We're almost fully staffed.
Nice.
We have about 2.5 openings left for teachers. One is the school psychologist, which we never.
Keep trying.
I'm working on that. And we have about 5 support staff positions left, so that's good. We feel like hiring this year. So yeah, been working on that, licensing, and open enrollment for benefits will be coming back up next month. Start, be effective January 1st, so that's really where I've been.
Great, thank you. All right, Morgan.
So for FY19, still waiting for a first draft of the audit, similar to all your local districts. Not anticipating any findings. Fieldwork went smoothly, and we've not really had a whole lot of follow-up questions on the SU or on Sheldon, which, as you know, is new to us, and it was not a year that we had any involvement in. For the current year, I included in your packet the reports that some of you are used to seeing. I went over the layout in your local meeting, so I won't do that again tonight, and I will say that I've not really dug into them at central office or for special ed yet either. Now that we've got the service plan done, I'll be able to do that for special ed once we get the first round of those expensive placement bills in, to look and have a more solid idea of where we're going to end the year. Costs at central office are really primarily salaries, and we've not had a lot of turnover, so I will dig into it, but I don't have any real concerns going into that. We do have some concerns about getting checks out in time, so if we could get a third person committed to coming up in case Rick or Kevin can't get there in a week, that would be great, or somebody who could be on call if we hit Thursday and we haven't seen 2 of them.
Yeah, I said last time that I'm happy. I just needed, just shoot me a text.
Okay.
And let me know, and I can come over.
And I would be too, but again, I wouldn't be able to get there until 4 on most days.
In terms of budget development, we've got some conversations coming later for the central office that will really inform the first draft of that budget. For the special ed budget, I was going to go over some changes from what we budgeted to who we actually have in the buildings right now, and then talk about, at least in terms of the service plan, where we're projecting going and what you will see in your first draft next meeting. The changes from this current year's budget to who we actually have in the building are actually pretty minor. Shirley filled 1 position higher than we had budgeted for in terms of FTE, and 1 position a little bit lower, and then we've moved a couple of people from a contracted service to a direct hire. So I'll go over those in more detail when we do the budget. And Michelle is planning on presenting a budget with an additional 0.5 special educator specific to early ed. So you will see that in the first draft. My hope is that we can bring something that's pretty close to level funded in terms of dollars. And if I get to move $250,000 of tuition to your local budgets, it gets a little easier to do that. You guys had at both your local meetings the discussion on the VHI and VSBIT annual meetings. Does anybody have those motions memorized?
Oh, right,
we
they were
need to-
like paragraphs long.
Both of the local boards voted to give the boards of VSBIT and the boards of VHI the proxy for those two annual meetings, at which little to nothing will happen.
Right.
I assume as an SU board, you want to do something similar?
Yeah. Proxy
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
attendance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first, and I'll email these to you, Amanda.
I have them in.
Oh, okay. The first is a motion to appoint as true and lawful attorney the Board of Directors of the Vermont School Board Insurance Trust by majority vote, with the power of substitution for it and its name to vote at the annual meeting of the Vermont School Board Insurance Trust to be held on the 8th day of November 2019 or at any adjournment thereof, with all the powers it should possess if personally present through its authorized representative.
I'll move.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And motion to appoint as its true and lawful attorney the Board of Directors of the Vermont Education Health Initiative by majority vote, with the power of substitution for it and its name to vote at the annual meeting of the Vermont Education Health Initiative to be held on the 8th day of November 2019, or at any adjournment thereof, with all the powers it should possess if personally present through its authorized representative.
I'll move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the only other thing I have on my agenda is an update on Act 11. Ed, Lynn, and I can tag team on this. That's the act that took healthcare bargaining away from you and gave it to this commission made up of basically VSBA and NEA appointees. What I was told on Friday is the two sides are going to submit their best and final offers to an arbiter sometime this week. The arbiter is going to release a report on November 1st. Normally you would get, when that report comes out, you'd get to see both of the proposals. I'm being told that we may not be able to see them because the two sides haven't actually agreed on what they're allowed to bargain over. So the arbiter's gonna have to first decide, yes, you're allowed to talk about this, no, you're not allowed to talk about that. And then we'll give them a chance to go and update their best and final offer based on that. I'm told we'll still probably be able to see those proposals in mid-November. And in theory, December 1st, the arbiter's gonna say it's this or it's this.
Why would they let us, I mean, we have no input, it's just kind of courtesy for us to see it? I mean,
It's because it's a public document at that point.
Right.
Yeah, there's
But
no
there's
courtesy
no, like,
involved.
but there's no input at that point saying,
Nope.
right, it's just basically like, here it is, this is what, it's gonna be one or the other.
Correct.
It's not like we're gonna talk to a VSBA and you're gonna talk, right? It's
Nope.
Once it's in the arbitrator's hands.
Right.
That part is done.
And we told you at your local meetings what the fact finder report was, and if that is the final decision, what it likely means in terms of especially benefits for your year-round staff.
Right.
They would be taking a haircut, and so that will definitely will come up in your negotiations
right.
with the administrators individually, and I expect with the support staff when you're talking about those full-year custodians and secretaries.
They also talked about that there will be no more in lieu of payments,
Correct.
so we'll be able to capture that.
That's what the fact finder recommended.
Yeah, that's really right. Right.
You said the January, July thing.
And the one thing that they have agreed on is that they don't want it to start on July 1,
Right.
2020. They want it to start on January 1st, 2021.
Right.
That would require action by the legislature, but everybody seems to think that that's going to come right away. And so there's one bright point of harmony.
And that,
in the
if I
process.
remember correctly, that was to allow budgeting to be.
It's actually more due to IRS rules around meeting your annual co-payments and things like that.
Oh.
HSAs and HRAs. It just doesn't make sense to start at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
They don't care about your budget.
Okay. I thought they might just this once. All right.
And unless you have any others, that's all I got.
Great. Lynn, you're up.
Okay. So we have been working really hard to come up with some creative ideas for how to solve the dilemma around teacher recruitment and retention. So we've had some exciting meetings recently. I'm gonna pass this around. You're gonna wanna take, make sure that you see concept 1 and concept 2, so it's 2 pages. Can you guys share that? So I'm gonna talk about,
share,
3
I guess,
concepts today.
It was Thursday? I think it was Thursday.
Yeah.
So the first is a teacher apprenticeship program concept. So we're trying to explore the idea of growing our own, looking through the lens of paraeducators that currently work within our system or folks within our local communities who might be ready for some sort of a mid-career shift. So the target audience for this idea, this concept, would be those paras with bachelor's degrees or those mid-career shifts, but the non-negotiables, they would have to have a bachelor's degree to start with. We had a meeting with UBEI administration, that's the Upper Valley Educator Institute out of Lebanon, New Hampshire. And we've hired several administrators who've come out of their master's level programs, and we're really impressed with what they're offering, what they're doing with their learners. So they agreed to work with us to develop and oversee a training program. And then at the end of that training program, they would recommend those apprentices for licensure. They can do that because they're a higher ed accredited institution and they have the capacity to be able to design based on the standards for teacher licensure and recommend them for licensure. So think about this conceptually. We would identify highly effective veteran teachers in our system to serve as mentors for teacher apprentices. While apprentices are taking courses at UBEI, online or in our area, they'd be working with the teacher mentors to implement what they're learning about in real time in the classroom with these highly effective teachers. We would pay them as paraeducators during that year, and in some cases, it may be able to replace a paraeducator or have that paraeducator shift into this role without adding another paraeducator. And we would have them serve the students collaboratively with that veteran teacher. So you get the benefit of both them working with the students in that year and then them having a whole year to work alongside a really highly effective teacher. There is not only value in the program with UBEI, this model would add some additional value because we would be able to select who our veteran staff members would be. These folks could attend our local in-services, our learning academies, our SU in-services, and they'd have a whole year of practical experience within our systems before applying for a job within our organization. In order to run a program here in this area, we would need a minimum of 10 people enrolled in UBEI to make it affordable. If there are fewer than 10 people interested, we could still do it, but those folks that model would require that some of that coursework would have to happen in Lebanon, New Hampshire, and I think they talked about like a once a week or twice a month to 1 weekend a month, something like that in Lebanon. We talked with them about could some of our instructional coaches or central office staff serve as like adjunct faculty for UBEI if UBEI trained us, and if we made that a part of the job responsibility. For example, if they're working on standards associated with working with students with disabilities, And if Michelle or Robin wanted to serve as adjunct through UVEI, we could embed that as part of their job responsibility, and they could do that during the day. That would reduce the overall cost of programming. The cost for the program is $16,700 per person if they provide all the staffing for this. The apprentices could borrow up to $12,000 to pay for their program. This is all just thought bubble going on now. We're brainstorming how to do this. So some of the funding sources that we talked about are our consolidated federal grant Title II money has to be used to provide professional development. And so that might be a resource. Heather Moore was with us when we were talking with UVEI, and she had all kinds of light bulbs going off about grants that she could write for to support this work. And we also could consider the local contributions that we're already paying for paraeducators as a potential source to be able to do this work. That we talked through our thinking and what we were just even conceptualizing with UVEI, and they had a little smile and they said, there's a model really similar to this in Northern New Hampshire. We really had no idea. We were just kind of in some design thinking, in a design thinking phase. And there are schools in the North Country of New Hampshire who have partnered with Dartmouth College, and they got a substantial federal grant to be able to do some of this work and design a program like this. Other ideas that we came up with were around, there's going to be about $4,700 not covered by loans, and that for people that are not making a large wage, that's a lot of money to come up with in a year. So we talked about we could potentially allocate resources to pay the difference through some of our grant funding for those people. This would be competitive, not just anyone would be let into the program. We would have to approve everyone that goes in. We also talked about one of our strategies when we negotiated last year was around the longevity bonus and, well, no, not the longevity bonus, the tuition reimbursement piece. So we talked about, what we know our data shows us that if teachers come to us and they stay through year 4, if we can get them into year 5, they typically stay. So if there was some sort of a growing reimbursement level, not reimbursement, if there was if we paid off some of their student loan after year 1, paid a little more after year 2, and had it increase over time to get them through year 4, that's another idea that we had. They talked about, UVEI talked about in the New Hampshire model, they have language that requires at least a 2-year commitment for anyone who is hired. This is, the details of this are not at all worked out. This is just like a concept of what if we explored this grow your own model where we could bring these people to us, do a full program, try to get 10 people signed up for it. We hired over 40 teachers this year, so we certainly would have a need to employ those teachers after this program. Or we could do something that's a little different, where if we had under 10, we could do something with UVEI, but they would have to travel. So what we're asking for you tonight is to give us feedback. Tell us if are we barking up something that you just are saying this is too out there for us, we don't want you to go any further, or is this idea something that you're willing to consider and have us go out and seek some grant funding opportunities to try to make something like this work?
I mean, my husband is like, this is exactly what he did. I think that if you have people in the building that I think if you were to just give them a little step that could be really great employees and, they live in the community, they're invested in the community. I think it's a great way. I don't know all the ins and outs of what, but just in theory, it sounds like a good program.
We don't know, and you have to help us with the ins and outs if we actually do this. Like all that, the detail would be worked out with the board and through negotiation process, but we really want you to just think about the concept of developing this.
10.
10, that's the part that I was catching on.
That seems like a big number.
That's the part that caught me a little bit.
Actually, this is this is,
Yeah, true. I don't know.
That's true.
I just,
I mean, if it was 10 for Bakersfield, I'd be worried.
right, I know. But like, so Jamie, do you have?
I didn't
people
mean
call-
that.
No, no,
That's
no,
right.
no, no, no. Do you have people calling you saying like, hey, do you have a apprenticeship program that I can get in on? Like, has anyone ever asked for
No,
this
but
before?
we've hired a number of our paraeducators
Yeah,
as teachers.
right.
Or what ends up happening is NCSS will snatch them up because, right? Because
Right.
they're at a level now where they could be making the next step.
Right, right.
But they're not licensed.
Yeah.
So they end up becoming more like a higher level professional, but could be doing that same work in our district, I feel.
Didn't Chittenden County schools do something like this?
I
Like,
don't know of anybody who's done this.
I don't know.
I'm not
I
saying
feel
that
like
they haven't, I just don't know.
Yeah.
No, I think you're talking about the TAP program.
yeah.
that's the
Yeah. The
which is
TAP
that
program.
goes into the tech centers.
No.
No, what is
That
that?
was also a teacher licensing endorsement, but it was like on the job training, basically.
But I don't
But it
think
was
that came from a
expensive.
school, that the TAP is through a higher ed place, right?
Like we did the TAP program through Champlain, like a lot of people
Yeah.
do Champlain
We're
College.
affiliated with.
Teacher apprenticeship.
Right.
Yeah, maybe that's what I was just thinking of.
It was expensive
Of
too, if I recall.
The piece where you had to have a bachelor's degree,
Right.
and then it was like another year or so, and then you could become an educator. So I don't dislike this idea at all. I just worry about the 10. That's the
I mean,
part
we
that.
have at least 6 that I can think of in the last couple of years that have started as paraeducators and are now working as teachers.
Yeah.
We also have parents and other folks who work in like after-school program
Right.
and subs
Right.
who are really skilled people
Yeah.
who are rooted in the community who have
interested.
bachelor's degrees.
And some of them have a lot.
It's
of
a
education.
win-win
Yeah.
in
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of ways if we can find 10 and take advantage of the grant structure program and then figure out that discrepancy between what UVEI covers and the total costs. What about the mentors, the veteran teachers?
We would
Do
have to
they
stipend
get
them.
compensation for their efforts?
Yeah, I mean, it would be, they're already doing things like that when they have student teachers.
Yeah.
We don't get a lot of student teachers, I'm gonna talk about that next. But when they do, they get a small, it's really a token.
Okay.
We talked about was, we could have the opportunity to really, shape the kind of embedded training. So we talked about, it would be great if we could have, if Morgan's the teacher apprentice, we could give him a semester with, this teacher who's exceptionally strong in math instruction, and then give him the next semester with this teacher in a different school that's exceptionally strong in literacy instruction. So they're getting experience in multiple systems, and they're learning from some of our strongest veteran teachers. So the 10 piece kind of panicked us a little bit too, but that's only to bring it all the way here. We still could do it even if we didn't have 10. We would just have to have some flexibility about when they would need to be there.
There, yeah.
The other piece is, I think, when we talked about this with UVEI, it was about the mid-career change folks. And, I was just using maybe it's Josie, the bank teller, who's really just kind of, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I want a change, is sitting on a bachelor's degree and has the ability to go do something like this. I think what the moral of the story is, we would like it to be people that are connected with our schools, but if they're connected with our communities, that's almost just as good.
Yeah.
Right? If we could find ways to get them into our schools and train them from within, that way we're not constantly playing that catch-up piece. We get a whole year with them before they're kind of live.
And if they already live in our communities, then they don't have to find housing.
Right.
Another giant piece of the puzzle, right?
And the possibility that they're going to be lured away to Chittenden County for
Yeah, is
social
less.
opportunities
Is less,
are
yeah.
lower.
Yep, yeah.
Now, it wouldn't be something you would have to do every year either, too. You could do like every other year, or is it kind of a commitment?
We get to design it.
Yeah.
He was talking, Paige, I don't remember Paige's last name, from UVEI. He's the director, and he was saying that Dartmouth, I think they're on cohort number 3, so they have run it every year. So we would be looking for grant funding, and Heather already, like, as soon as I even talked the concept with her, she was like, I know of 2 grants within the county that are rather large, like $100,000 or $200,000 to think about designing an idea like this. So she right off the top knew of that, and Paige connected her with the folks at Dartmouth to get a sense of where did they get their grant money. So she's trying to protect some of her time to focus just on this. So what we're waiting on is for you to approve the concept, and then we're gonna do some work with UVEI to do some sort of an interest. We're hoping to do some personal invites for some folks that we know have bachelor's degrees to come out for an information session and learn about it with the folks from UVEI and what this could look like, but just to try to get a sense of within the community, if you had the opportunity to become a teacher in a year, would you be interested to come out and learn more, to just see what kind of interest is out there?
Yeah, I don't, there's no red flags in my mind that why we shouldn't pursue this as an opportunity. I mean, I'm not saying it's a slam dunk, but I'm saying like, keep going. That's my opinion, I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think has tremendous potential. I mean, there are a lot of things to figure out, but that idea of kind of growing our own from within our community, and I also, there's so much institutional knowledge and experience with our more veteran master teachers that we lose when they retire. And so if we can capture some of that in the next wave of teachers coming in, it behooves us to try to do that.
Absolutely. Some of the grants have matching fund requirements, so that's the other part I just wanted to be transparent about. Like, we'll seek these, we'll look for, I don't know if this is we could make it fly for this next year. It really will depend on the funding and really looking at what kind of interest there is. But we're ready to go and keep exploring.
What's the current professional development for money for Paris? Do they have any? Don't they have like one class or 2 credits or something?
One pool, they can tap up to
What is it?
500.
$500.
Oh, it's 500.
But it's not every para that gets 500. There's a pool of 4,500, but they can only get 500 max. So really only 9 people
Oh, I got you.
can
Okay.
access that
Okay.
per district.
So we're good, we'll go ahead on that, exploring. Okay, concept number 2. This one isn't gonna cost any money to anybody at this table, so this is more, we met with UVM, education department leaders, and had a conversation with them. This came up, I think this summer. I had a conversation with the person who's in charge of UVM elementary education licensing program, and told her that we're really struggling with recruiting teachers, and we would love to see more student teachers come our way. So she went back to UVM and she reached back out, and UVM is interested in exploring grants. Like, they will give grants to try to get some kids placed up here. There are some barriers that they face. About 80% of the students in their ed department are out-of-state students, so a lot of times they don't have cars. So the barriers that they were trying to work through were not even barriers we were thinking of. So they said that they would like to write a grant through UVM to offer some sort of a home share experience for student teachers. So they would only open it up to like staff members that have been background checked through our SU. So if you were an employee of our SU, and you have an extra room, would you be willing to give a room to a UVM student for like Sunday to Thursday each week, and you get a stipend for doing that? And the other piece that we talked about in that is the ride share. We have so many teachers that are coming out of Chittenden County and driving our way, that they could work with us to match those commuters with these potential student teachers, and provide those commuters with a transportation stipend, so it'd be mutually beneficial for them. And then the other target audience would be like those Franklin County kids who are actually going to UVM, who could live at home and student teach here during their senior year. So they're engaged and ready to work with us, and we're hopeful that we could start seeing student teachers from UVM as early as next fall. So they've got some more work to do to explore the grant piece, and then once we get the go-ahead from them, we'll introduce this idea of the homestay or the ride share to our folks. Sound reasonable?
How many hours are they required to student teach, do you know?
So they're pretty much full-time for the last semester. Their first semester of senior year, I mean, it's a 2-semester commitment generally, but sometimes they're in different locations for each semester. It's a little less, but I don't honestly know how many hours, Rick. I think I think she said the first semester part, they would not be able to live up here as easily because the first semester they still have an on-campus class or 2. But the second semester they don't. So the third concept, and we have talked about this a few times out of my office, is that when we're thinking about retaining teachers, one of the barriers that some teachers up here have is a lack of childcare opportunities in this area. I think that that's something that we recognize in our region just in general. So we had talked about what if we opened our own child care center and had it open for our teachers. And so teachers' children would be given priority to come into the child care center. We would run the center only during the school year and during in-services when your teachers were required to be here. We would keep the costs low. We would do it just based on the cost and not try to make a profit out of that program to make that really appealing to our parents that we have. And Jamie, we've talked through this with the business office, just deducting the cost of the child care right out of the payroll automatically, so we weren't dealing with billing and receiving at all. So that's kind of the retention portion of that strategy. The other part, I talked with Nate at Cold Hollow, and we were talking about if we were able to do some sort of child care center and we did it nearby in Enosburg potentially, if Cold Hollow were in a position down the road to consider adding another program, if they were looking at the education and training option or the human services option, we could look at that as a recruitment strategy as well, because we could align their program experiences with real world work in the center, education related work or human service related work right in the center. So we would look at that as an opportunity if we explored the child care center, that it's both retaining and attracting.
That's what Northwest Tech has, is the daycare, and they end up having, well, they've been doing that for like decades, but they have waiting lists for kids because everybody tries to get into it. Yeah, exactly.
So this would not be something that I would personally want to lift on myself right now, because I think it's going to be a relatively heavy lift. However, in a little bit, we're going to talk about a proposal for the early ed director, and this could potentially be something that we could charge the early ed director with researching and trying to think through for the following year. So what's your feedback on that concept?
I would just like to publicly state how much I hate UVM as a Vermont State College employee. It's like my oath of office to hate UVM.
That is on camera.
Yeah, I don't care. I like the childcare thing worries me. I've seen it done very successfully at colleges, and technical centers that have that program in place. I mean, where I got my undergrad, they had a great early childhood area because they had that it's a built-in. You got students that are working there and people and so they had a really great opportunity. I feel like, I don't really know all of this, but I just feel like there's a lot of liabilities in the early childhood. Like, let's not kill a kid. Like, I don't know. I just feel like I feel like there's a lot of liabilities there that I don't understand, that I wouldn't.
That's absolutely our goal when we have them from
Yes,
from
exactly.
K up.
From
Let's not kill
K on,
anybody. Yeah. So and I would want to make sure that we didn't put the cart before the horse, that we had, if we were to do this, that we had we have the director, we have the program, we have, high school kids that already know how to do this, instead of we start it all at the same time, right?
This would be a long range. This wouldn't be an immediate piece, but Heather is wanting some feedback on this as well, because there are some, we can't as an SU own property. The districts can own property.
Right.
But when we were talking through some of these concepts, there, and I wish he was here, I don't remember the name of the organizations, but there are some that will fund actual construction or things like this, because it is such a need in the community just
Yeah.
in general for childcare. So she would be exploring that, and we would be looking down the road, not anywhere right now on our radar.
And even just thinking about the need, like, for instance, my oldest didn't go to play school or preschool because I couldn't get them midday. Exactly. So when you think about even just the opportunities that are limiting just because they can't get to daycare, right? So just thinking about something like on campus or close to, you could open some educational opportunities up to some pretty young kids that might not be getting it. But yeah, no, I can see your concern. Like,
Yeah, I don't,
it's
and
like,
I don't,
I know.
daycares are hard.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a really big problem and it's somebody else's problem to deal with.
Well, it's about to be, which is
I'm like all
So
over
their
1 and
daycare-
2.
Yeah.
Their daycare regs are very similar to our early ed regs. Like
Yeah,
we talked
okay.
to you about that dual governance.
Right.
We have our preschoolers kind of are governed by both the Agency of Education, which
Right.
governs our K-12.
Right.
They're also governed by Agency of Human Services, which is the same regulation as the childcare. So
Yeah.
I'm less worried because we're already living it
Okay.
in our preschool centers, but I completely hear you, and we can put the brake pedal on that. It's something that if you're not interested now, I might bring back to you down the road. It's definitely a concept that keeps circling back up.
Yeah.
I'm all on board with the UVM collaboration. I think that sounds excellent, and I think continuing to forge ahead with that. Sorry.
It's okay. I'll still like you.
As the parent of a UVM student, I'm enthusiastically in support of that. I'm reticent about that feels daunting to me on a kind of logistical level, but I don't. I'm just like, I'm seeing dollars and they're just like constructing a building or renting a space and keeping the lights on and the heat and the staff and their insurance and their salary. And I'm wondering, I'd love to see what is the legitimate need within our 8 schools, like how many people would really use, how many people, how many teachers and staff would really use that facility? Were we offering that service, some really hardcore kind of numbers and data? Now granted, that's a moving target because we could have someone come into the district next year who has 5 kids under the age of 7 and would be thrilled to have in-house, in-district childcare. So I know that's a little hard to kind of totally pin down, but I'd love to know what are the actual needs, and then these costs. I mean, we talk about we would pay it into payroll and stuff, and would it be level funded, or would there be a cost sharing kind of component on the part of the SU to maintain the program, and how much would be covered by the people seeking, paying for the service of their childcare, and how much would we be matching some of this? Does this get into kind of a similar matching thing like we do with healthcare? So that's just the costs intimidate me when we're already just dealing with so many costs.
Great questions, Mary, and it's not developed enough to even
Yeah.
get into how. I think that I've heard enough to say we can safely hit the brakes on that piece and move forward with the other 2. Once we get an early ed director, if you put that later in the agenda, on board, that could be a charge of looking at a survey and doing some data, looking
Right.
at actual costs of what it might be at that time. So we can be looking down the road.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like the concept. I guess I wouldn't necessarily limit it to, so, what am I trying to say? So, I think that, I just wouldn't necessarily limit it to staff, because if we did outside, we can actually offset some of our costs if we open it up. And the other thing is, I think it's pretty hard to run a daycare for just part of the year.
Oh, right.
you know, I think that you might need to have it open year round.
So the thinking behind that piece, a lot of times teachers have to pay for their daycare spot all through the summer, even when they don't send their children, because they're saving their spot for the next fall. So the thinking behind only running it for staff, if there really was data that supported that, would be that it would be another cost saving. It would be appealing to those teachers to not have to pay when they're not intending to use it.
Right, but it might be hard for them, they might be hard for them if they need daycare when they're not open, it might be hard for them to find that daycare. That would be my concern.
I see what you're saying.
It's pretty hard to find daycare.
It is.
Period.
very hard.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was my best one out of 4.
But I mean, honestly, I think there's other benefits for opening a daycare for the community and staff, especially because I think with early childhood learning, we can morph that whole system together. So I think that might work really well.
I think so too.
But I think it takes, I mean, I wouldn't put the brakes on it necessarily, but I think it's gonna be a couple year planning
Well,
thing anyway.
We would need somebody who had time to attend to it, and I can be transparent and say, it is not me. But if there was someone whose role was to look at the AHS regs and really look at conceptually, could this fly?
Yeah, I think that it might be a great idea, actually.
It's an interesting kind of dilemma, like at what, like, you know, there's a dearth for sure of childcare services up here. I dealt with it when I had 3 little children and there was no play school and no preschool back then in the SU. So I look at the young parents today, I'm like, you are so lucky with this play school and preschool. I was driving over an hour to get kids into kind of early ed programming back in the day. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of us were. But some of these things, I'm like, where is this line between the private sector and the school district? And how much do we take on how much of the container do we need to hold? We do so much, and we kind of capture so many parts of our community, our families, our kids, their needs, their social, emotional needs, their physical health needs, their nutrition needs, their academic needs, and all of this stuff. And yes, we have staff that we need to support and stuff, but like the now becoming daycare providers or kind of running a daycare in addition to the kind of breadth and depth and complexity of what everyone at this table manages for the district feels like.
I see, so I'm looking at it from the other way, and the fact that here you're talking about college and career readiness. This is a need that the state's screaming for, and we have the capacity to train kids, teenagers, whatever, in order to enter this workforce where there is a need.
Training teenagers. I'm
So
sorry, I missed
the
that
cold
part.
hollow-
To run,
cold
okay,
hollow,
to be the employees and staff the childcare.
So they would be learning about
Maybe.
human service, like a human services degree.
Yeah.
Early childhood education degree, right? So that's kind of the track that they would be
Yeah.
going on.
Not to have them be employees of the
Right.
center now,
But they would
but
be
to plant that
students.
seed in them as a recruitment strategy
Yeah.
for later. Like, here are some ways. It's really hard for us to find early childhood staff, but we could do some work through Cold Hollow in partnership with the center. We'd still have to have our own staff there, and those
Right.
students would, do portions of their day in the center, and I don't
Like in
know
that
if that's what
student teaching
Northwest Tech
kinda-
does.
So Northwest
Yeah.
Tech they have a human services, which is like the social work component, right? Human services, and then they also have like an early childhood education. And they flip between those 2 programs for classes. And then part of their like practicum or whatever is working in the daycare. And so there's one teacher, the teacher, and there's 2 teachers. And a para, and then the kids work in the preschool. Okay. It was kind of like that.
Well, we should probably move on, but
Yeah.
time-wise,
Right.
because Lynn, you still have a lot, and I think maybe we're saying more enthusiastically the first two concepts, and then seems like there's more to kind of flesh out around this childcare, and I think really understanding how much of a limiting factor in our hiring and our retention is the lack of childcare in the area would be a good place to really start and drill down and then go from there. That's my sense.
I put survey down. Okay.
Number 2, do we want to limit ourselves to UVM?
So it's UVM that
Thank you.
was working with us. It's just the first one that we've reached out to, but we're not trying to limit ourselves just to them. We don't get a lot of candidates, period, and we push on them specifically, so.
Okay.
We'll be looking at Johnson, St. Ranks.
And then, it's primarily a distance thing, is the reason we don't get them? Okay. So I'm gonna throw this out there a little bit, but what happens if we paid them a small stipend?
The student teachers?
Mhm.
I don't know. if
I
we
don't
do
think we
that.
can do that.
Can't do that.
Well, because it's like a class, in theory, it's a class that they're completing.
Yeah, we'll
Right.
work on it.
But we could
Reimburse them
provide
for
them a technically
travel.
free place to
Yeah, okay.
live and
Okay.
not technically, because they'd still have to pay for their dorm. We're trying to get creative, so
Okay.
keep
Yeah.
thinking. If you think of other things, push back on me about it. In terms of personnel, when we're thinking about the SU staff, unless you tell me differently, what I'm intending to say to the SU staff is the same thing that I said last year, which is we will give them the average raise of our principals minus the high and the low, that dollar value, unless there's someone who feels the need to negotiate individually. Does that sound?
Wait, I'm sorry, I missed the
So
very first
we have
part
to
of that.
negotiate with our SU staff.
Right.
So unless you tell me otherwise, my intention is to just say to them, I'm gonna offer you a contract and your raise is gonna be the equivalent of the average raise for our principals minus the high and the low, which has been your past practice. And I will do that unless someone says they really have a need to negotiate individually.
Okay.
What's that percentage this year, just out of curiosity?
It's a dollar value. I don't know what it is, do you?
Jamie usually tells me before I can look it up. I'll look it up.
Value.
Do you know it?
It was like $2,999.
There you go.
Really? Really?
Which is about what it's been the last couple of years.
We're almost on.
Moves a couple hundred up or down each year.
And then this has historically been
How we've
the
done it.
process.
Yes.
But we have had folks come to us for special circumstances or
They
whatever,
feel
yeah.
like they're off.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they're out of line with other like people
Right.
around.
Right.
They could choose to come and negotiate individually, but my intention would be just to offer contracts unless I hear from them.
And do you need a motion for that?
No, I
Okay.
just need a direction.
Yeah, do that.
And just keep in mind that the healthcare cloud is over everybody as well, so we don't know what that's gonna look like.
So you do have one retirement notification. Louise Greene, who has been a special educator here in Franklin Northeast for 30+ years, do you know?
31 or 2 years.
She has notified us that she'll be retiring effective June 30th. So I would ask for you to make a motion to accept her retirement.
Can you do a long exit interview and ask her why she stayed for 30 odd years?
Because she lived in the community.
Yeah.
She lives in Berkshire.
Yeah, exactly.
I,
Got her daughter hired, so.
okay, all right then, fine, we'll let her go then. I'll make the motion to accept her retirement request.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So there, in your board packet, there is a request from Northwest Access TV. I've already talked to each of the local boards about this, the shift to the per capita cost, and what they're asking for is $800 $62 from the SU board, to cover your meetings this year.
Wasn't it like $768 for the?
Enosburg, Richburg.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about that, no offense taken. So isn't that kind of like paying twice? It's like you're paying, your SU's paying, but then each local board is paying? Isn't it all the same per capita,
But they're
ultimately?
Billing 3 times. I get that.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
You should
But
send
you're different,
separate
the actual
messages.
different, separate.
782.
Okay. All right, fine.
Sorry, 862.
Yeah, I guess I don't know, understand why that,
Yeah, we did as well.
What?
We did approve it as well last week.
Right,
Last
I don't
week.
remember the numbers though, do you?
Yeah,
I
that's
can't-
my
it
own.
wasn't
Numbers don't
quite-
stick in my
It's
head.
per capita,
It
it's
wasn't
based on the
quite as high
population, so
as-
add in their district as well. So Enosburg, Richford, now add in Bakersfield,
The two numbers don't
Berkshire,
count.
Montgomery, Sheldon.
that's what would make your per capita go up.
per capita on what?
The price per capita, so that you take the number of your people divided by whatever.
That doesn't even come close mathematically.
Well,
So-
you're talking to the wrong person, so.
It should,
No,
if they were doing it that way, in theory, wouldn't it be the combined total of the two?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So that is not how the math
Yeah.
works out, so I don't know where 862 came from. If you
Okay.
don't wish to approve it yet, I can push back and ask questions.
Ask questions just out of.
Well, this
I
does
just assumed it was
say,
based on the number of meetings, but
763 was the Enosburg Richford number.
I feel like that was the,
That feels
But also-
close to what we agreed on for NMV. I don't totally
We're a
remember
little higher.
the number.
I don't have that.
Do you remember the number from
I
last?
don't, I think yours was higher, but you
Yours is
have more
higher.
people.
It's per capita, that
But
way
it-
doesn't make sense.
hold on.
Maybe.
Well, I see what you're saying because now we're asking each of the town, the per capita, if it really is legitimately per capita, now everyone's paying twice.
Right.
Right, like as a member of NMVU, every townsperson, right?
It's paid
And
for-
now as a member of FNESU, they're paying, again, no, am I
Hold-
missing?
okay.
Oh, and as
Did
a
you get
member
3 of
the
these letters, or
Town, if they're
you got
doing it
3?
for the select board, and as a member of the village, if they're doing it for the village.
I mean,
board.
I'm in support of it because
Yeah.
the numbers of views support the fact that people want this service and value it and watch these meetings. And it's hard for many members to get to these meetings and participate, and I think it's important from a transparency perspective. I'm fully in support of that, but I do see what you're saying.
Just like, wait a minute. But yes, I also support.
It's like
but I
being
just wanna
billed
know where
twice.
the numbers come
It
from.
was the same
I'd like to
number.
be more clear on that.
What would you like me to do?
I think there might be a typographical error in the letter because it says in the 3rd paragraph, with changes to federal regulations, we now have to ask Northern Mountain Valley Unified Union School District. They already asked us.
I know.
Okay. Just putting that out there.
So on the top, if you look at the header, the address.
It
I
says
divided these-
FNESU.
So they gave me one that said NMV, one that said ERUUSD, and one that said FNESU.
So that's,
But they forgot to change that part in the middle.
But do you think, 7.5 cents per capita?
what was it, 75?
Could we just get some clarification from them
So
on
I'll bring
this?
it back to you
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
November.
We're happy to be
Yes.
supportive, but we just want to not,
The facts.
we just want the facts.
Exactly.
All right, so we're gonna table that till
We're
November.
gonna table that, yep.
All right.
I'd rather table it than vote on something
no.
no one can understand.
Right.
Because
And we're on camera, but going, I don't know where it came from, sure.
so you get to review the tape and see the questions, right? So teacher negotiations, we really have not, Morgan and I have not had 5 minutes together to really talk through a strategy timeline for negotiations. We have in-service on Monday with our teachers, and the president of our teachers union wants to talk with us about timeline for getting started, at least doing some of the pre-work around negotiations. So last year, we had Paul Hatch, who was on the SU board, who worked as kind of a lead for negotiations. and he did some pre-work with Morgan and I and some of these representatives just around goal setting, common agreements like norms, things like that, that you were going to live by through negotiations. So we want to just set a timeline for that, and I didn't know if you had any input that you wanted us to tune into or any thinking about how you wanted this negotiation cycle to go. We did I want to say one more thing, we did do the alignment between Sheldon and FNESU last year in terms of language. We'll have to do on the teacher negotiation side, kind of get all the way there this year. We aligned the salary stuff too, but we'll have to get all the way there. On the support staff side, we haven't done that language side-by-side review yet. So we have more work to do on that support staff side to align the language. So I think Todd's thinking is that we'll start with working on that language for the support staff.
Do we have a negotiation team, or does the whole board negotiate?
You have a
Districts.
negotiation
Committee.
team.
Yep, from the NMV side, it's Jean Marie and Leanne Trombley. From the ERU side, it's Rick, Polly for the support staff, and Kevin for the teachers.
Okay.
You don't remember saying.
Who knew?
I know, I was like, I don't remember being on that list.
I was just thinking,
Reorganized.
boy, I'm glad that's not my job.
I thought the teacher stuff went really, I thought that went, well, both of them went really well last year.
Yeah,
so.
I sat in on the support staff a little bit at the end, and yeah, it was really fairly smooth.
Nice.
So do you want us to set the stage the way we did last year, try to set a similar timeline?
I think that was perfect.
The pre-work, who's the new Paul? So Paul was kind of the chief board negotiator. So we'll need, and I don't know if we need that from them yet, but we'll want them to be a part of the pre-conversations with the.
Who is it? It's the three of us and Leanne? Is that who you just
It's
said?
you, Rick, Leanne, and then either Kevin or Polly, depending on whether it's teachers or paras.
Okay.
I can't do teachers.
Does Leanne do, she doesn't work with unionized staff?
I know Leanne well enough to know that she would not be happy if you made her.
I just was asking
She's
if
not here,
she
though.
worked with
Good idea.
unionized. Listen, I have to go to the bathroom, but I stayed here so that no one would nominate me for something.
Just run out real quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think your lights are on.
I've worked with this board before.
And you need that to be from someone who's already on those committees. So those of us who aren't on the committee can't.
Right.
And
Feel
what,
free to
can
go
you
to the
give me a
bathroom all you
timeline on
want.
this?
What?
That was nice of you to try to fall on your sword right there. What's the timeline? Like, when would that work be done?
So we're thinking we're starting this fall, at least on the language piece with support staff. We could start on some of the language stuff with teachers. Everybody really wants to know what's happening December 1st with the binding arbitration binding. Because they're not gonna wanna negotiate salary until they know the impact
Right.
on their insurance.
I sat in one support staff meeting last year. Like, I feel like such a newbie that I'm really hesitant.
I think Rick should do it.
Sure.
There, that was easy.
Thank you, Rick.
Rick is cut up
But-
that cloth.
By the rules of elimination.
If I had a bigger clue, I was gonna fall into the hole there, but
I had a bigger clue.
So
I encourage you to leave.
I have introduced the concept of the early childhood director proposal to you in your local meetings, and I introduced it at this meeting last month. So I want to open up a conversation, any questions you have about that model. What we would like to do is embed that into this next budget and do a school year type contract, so it would not be a year-round position. We would probably do a little more than a teacher contract, so the teachers would have like 186 days, so we'd be looking at maybe like 195, somewhere in that range. So we're looking tonight for you to give us direction on whether or not you're ready to approve this concept for the board, or for the budget.
here's my only hesitation. I really want the facilities and grounds person, like bad. And I'm fine with both of them, but I worry about the budget overload. That's my only concern. So that's all. I'm fine with them both if we can afford them both. But if I had to pick one for this year, I would pick facilities and ground.
Would you like me to take that part of the conversation first? Because I think that the two sides might not be in the same place.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna go to facilities and grounds first. So we had talked about this concept of a facilities and grounds director, and I didn't really hand you any information. I have some information here to just share with you. What you'll see on the top is this form. It's the description. Remember I told you there was a pilot project with VisBit and VSA? So this is kind of a description of the type of training that they're providing to our facilities grounds directors. And then there's a facilities maintenance professional model that's coming like a year from now. I pulled a variety of job descriptions for facilities coordinators. And here's an example. I gave you the Chipman East one. I thought that one was really concise, but I do have others if you wanted to look at them.
Hold on, we're a little bit confused over here.
What's the matter?
I have the what am I supposed to?
Just like
But
that.
there's no more. Then I got this big
Oh,
stack
here,
of
take
other
mine.
things.
Oh, pass mine that way.
Oh, here.
Do you want me to send this back to you?
Yes, that's the rest of my job.
Oh, we got more
Yes,
than we
it
need.
is, yes.
Okay.
Okay, this is.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Lynn.
Yeah.
It
It
just
was me
was,
that sent the wrong packet.
I couldn't listen and cipher out my
Oh,
paperwork
no.
all at the same time.
I think we're good.
Okay,
Folded one is the training,
yep.
to give you a sense. The job description is Chittenden East, their job description for that role. So what I'm asking you to think about tonight is whether or not, one, you wanna entertain the idea of a facilities and grounds director. If yes, at what level? Do you want this to be at the school district level, so that you would have a facilities and grounds director for NMV and or for ERUSD, which would be determined at each of those local board levels? At the SU level, so you'd have one person in charge of all 10 of our campuses, or at the SD/town level. So maybe you would have one for NMV, you would have one in charge of Enosburg schools and one in charge of Richford schools. So that's the conversation.
I have said all along I would like to have one for the entire SU, at the FNESU level. I think that's well within, for the right person, 10 buildings, that level of management, because this isn't the person that's gonna be in every single building, running around, fixing everything. They're going to be administering rather, the kind of the work that needs to be happening in the respective buildings. I think it's well within the capability of with the right person to do at the SU level. Would be a higher salary, obviously, because that's a lot, those are a lot of facilities and grounds to manage, but rather than having two separate or even possibly three, seems much more efficient to have one person managing all the properties and facilities in the entire SU. That's my preference.
From our side, like Richford has a model where we have one guy who kind of oversees both buildings today. Enosburg has one guy who oversees this building, and then the other two buildings are solo at this point. But we kind of discussed that we would kind of try to stay the course with what we have and see what would work best for us moving forward.
Okay.
What are those staff people that you mentioned, like what are their titles, their job titles?
One is facilities manager, right, in Richford, I believe.
Jamie.
Yes.
And then
And then here, we have 3 head custodians.
head custodians, yeah.
We have a Cold Hollow, an elementary, and high school.
So yeah, weren't we talking about that if we decided to, it might be better that the 2 districts,
Right.
if we decided to go instead of an SU.
Right, from our side, if we were to do anything, we would probably try to stay.
We thought our needs might be a little different. than
Yeah, I was
yours.
just gonna say, I think that, I'm happy to speak beyond Bakersfield and as a member of the NMV board, the facilities issues at all of those elementary schools are primarily managed by those building principals.
Right.
It is a ginormous amount of their time that is consumed with that and has been for years. I mean, I've been on the board long enough to have gone through a few different building principals, and you know, what I said in the last NMV meeting was there not a single principal in the history of the world ever decided to go into the education world so that they could figure out how to run a water system in Berkshire or spend all their time deciding about the heating and ventilating system, right? So what they want to do and what we're having them do are 2 very different. There's a lot of their days that are consumed with understanding these, trying to make smart decisions. And so I work with a facilities manager for the college who manages all of our campuses, and the knowledge that he has saves us tens of thousands of dollars on an annual basis. And so I think that we have people that are trying wholeheartedly to make the best decisions for our buildings, but just don't have the knowledge base, right? So we're making errors. For sure there's errors that are being made, and that's affecting our heating and ventilating bills and so forth. So I'm 100% behind a facilities manager because I think that in these small buildings, they are will be able to recoup the the savings on the other side from errors that are being made unknowingly is huge. So
I also think logistically, if you're gonna have a plan, like if you're gonna have a 5-year building plan,
Yeah.
it makes sense to do that at the district level because that's where the budgeting is also done. So you don't get into, predicaments. Well, this year, somebody else's school was designed to, the funding matches
Right,
the planning
right,
better, I
right.
think, that way.
yeah.
So just to clarify, they already have, it sounds like Enosburg and Richford already have a facilities manager.
Richford does.
Richford
As
does.
a person whose
They have
title
a
is.
person who's hired to be a facilities manager, and I have sent this information to that person and said, I think you should take this course, because if they're gonna be in that role, we
Right.
want to give them what they need to be in that role as efficiently and effectively as they can. There is not one person who serves the whole of the Enosburg campuses. There's a head in each of the 3 buildings.
Okay.
And so in the K-8 schools, we have custodians who came in wanting to be a custodian and are now being asked to, can you call a paving company and figure out how we get an estimate? Like
That's where I was at. I'm like, I feel like there needs to be somebody who is looking down the road and saying, okay, we need to start
Yeah.
looking for paving contracts.
Yeah.
We need to think proactively opposed to just putting out fires.
Mhm.
So I think either we tap into the resources we have with the people we have, or maybe down the road we find out that we need somebody, but like Rick was saying, I think it might make more sense to do it on the district level versus the
So the person that is currently working in Richford could potentially oversee, is that what you all talked about? Could potentially oversee Richford
We-
and
we haven't got
Enosburg,
that
or
far
no?
yet.
Yeah, no.
We
But-
just talked about this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
we just both talked about whether we wanted it at the SU level or more.
Yeah.
District.
You'd prefer it at the district level.
Yeah.
And I know there were people on the NMV board who seemed to prefer it on the NMV level. When we, so, I mean, I think I was somewhat the outlier actually in feeling like just for efficiency's sake and potentially cost for salary and benefits and all of that, I was leaning toward the one person, but that, I didn't realize that you already have a person in that role at Richford and you're happy with that arrangement, so.
If we did this at the district or district/town level, what I would like to see is everyone in that role to get this level of
Right.
intensive training and for there to be embedded opportunities for the three to work collaboratively, because if we went with 3 or 2 or whatever model Enosburg Richford decides ultimately, because I think that there are some things that we could do together that could potentially
Right,
still look at it through the overall lens.
they're all gonna have different skill sets, right?
Right.
I mean, in theory, they're all gonna have different skill sets. You're not gonna hire 3 electricians or 3 plumbers to do that. Each one of them is gonna have their background and expertise where they can, just bounce ideas off of each other
Yeah.
and work collaboratively together.
Absolutely.
I do think that if we move forward with this at the district level and that NMV is, I feel like we're tending towards this as a great idea. That if you hire somebody to manage those buildings for us, and then in 5 years, you guys are like, it does seem to, we're in a position now, like maybe you've lost a person or your buildings are having, whatever it is that we sort of start small and then scale larger when and if the need arises.
So I feel like I'm hearing not at the SU level, so this would mean that I would push back in the November meeting to NMV for you to consider whether or not you wanted to move forward with this model, and you'd have to vote for that at that level.
Okay.
Am I good?
Yeah, and this is probably not practical at all because it crosses districts, but geographically, I think that, well, if we're already looking at, we have the person in Richford and then possibly someone independently working in Enosburg, it's much closer to Sheldon for a person to be kind of toggling back between, tacking between those 2 facilities and then the 3 smaller schools. But again, I mean, I may just be splitting hairs as far as kind of efficiency. I don't know where, where the person kind of has his or her office, where they're based, but Sheldon is a full 50-minute drive in snow to Montgomery or in possibly Bakersfield, as far as issues that arise over the course of the day and getting to a building if they were needed on site to assess an issue that was kind of more emergent.
I totally hear what you're saying. It's really 10 minutes to Sheldon from here. It doesn't take much more than that to get out to that school, and that's something that we're all navigating. I mean, we haven't navigated it yet with the snow, but I'm not as worried about the extra minutes to get there because you already are employing all of us who are all already doing that, toggling between
all of
each building as those needs
valid point
arise.
But I think when I work with this facilities manager for the college, we talk frequently, but he is only on my campus 1 day a week, right? And he knows I have to be there with the elevator inspection guy on this day or whatever. He works that in. And the winter when the pipe blew and I flooded the first floor of a building, I, in a panic, called him and he came right away, right? So, but those days are limited. So I would imagine that this person would sort of plan their days Mondays I am in the Berkshire building and Tuesdays I'm in, whatever, something.
Yeah.
I would imagine it might be something like that, so that he or she is sort of having their touch on each campus, frequently, but not constant, not as a.
So district level sounds like the general consensus then, eh?
So am I bringing this back on the ER side, or are we done that conversation on the ER side?
No, I think we need to bring it back at some point in time.
I'd like to kind of know what it looks like.
Yep, me too. We haven't even talked
Like,
about
is
how
it
it's
that
all-
they meet quarterly together? Like those kinds of things, I
Yeah.
kind of would
Yeah.
like to. Gosh, or maybe not, maybe we test something.
So I wanted to,
Back early in.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Morgan.
Sorry,
Oh,
I
yeah.
sidelined you.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay.
So that being said, the early childhood education now would be the position that comes within the MCU. Which makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not opposed.
Yeah.
Others?
Are you ready for a motion, or?
Are you opposed, Kevin?
No.
No.
So I move
It's not four
that,
either.
that we.
It didn't look like a four face.
Probably no motion, just
No.
tell us to add it to the budget. So are you good with like the 195, 196-ish day idea?
Yeah.
Yes. Maybe bringing that with you.
Hey Lynn, I missed last meeting, so can you just give me a 30-second job description for this person?
You want me to do that in 30 seconds?
15,
So,
if you can.
building principals are spending way too much time trying to figure out the regulations associated with early childhood education.
Okay.
And special education, and this is to take off from them so that we can be in compliance with licensure between AHS and AOE.
Okay.
And not have the principals spend their time doing that.
Okay, so this is just making sure we're in compliance at all.
And providing all of the ongoing training, background checks, all the things that come with compliance of early childhood programming. And really working at improving the programming we are providing, because we really don't have the capacity in my office or the expertise, none of us, to really dig into what should we be doing to improve early childhood opportunities for our kids.
Okay.
So want somebody with that expertise and that lens to focus solely on that. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so back to,
Lynn, it did say in the agenda to make a motion to hire.
I know, but
You don't
Morgan
feel like
reminded
you-
me that I don't need.
Okay.
That's me thinking out loud, but we're
Okay.
just- you're gonna make a motion to your budget.
Right.
When you're budgeting, you're just telling us to put it in there.
And this is an FNESU level
Yes.
position.
Yes. Systems analysis work. So what our plan is this year, is to try to figure out how to navigate this budget process in our newly merged system. So we're really trying to make this data driven. So Morgan has developed a data tool so that we can really dig in and see what human resources we have in each of our schools and what's the need of our student population in each of our schools. So we're intending to roll that out. I think it's starting the week after next with principals, and then we're gonna bring that data point to the boards for the November meeting. So you have, right now, each individual principal has done their budget with Morgan. Our intention, well, I don't know how to articulate this. Are you still wanting us to do it that way? Are you wanting us to be opening it up and looking at the budget development process as your new district? Can you help me with this one? What am I trying to ask?
I think we're looking for some guidance on how you all see the budget development process
I think
shaking out.
you have to
with
kind of
these
start
merged
at the
districts.
granular level of going to each building's principal and figuring out what their needs are. Don't you think, instead of going to a district?
We've already done that piece.
Okay, and so what are you asking, what now?
So then we're getting into, what we're struggling a little bit with conceptually is there's data and people, you all, and leaders, everybody's kind of asking questions about, so now this budget is approved at the district level. So what we're trying to navigate through is, what does that mean? So we we have all of those individual budgets that we're bringing forth, and we have all this data that we're gathering, so we can just bring you the individual budgets. We can look at those human resources, we can look at your student level information as a board, but is there something you're wanting in terms of process that we haven't done yet? Or that we're not telling you that we're gonna do?
So I think as an example, at the NMV meeting, there was a nurse that came and had concerns about nursing levels at 2 of the 4 schools. So that is put on the table, and that has budget implications. And we're gathering that information so we can bring to that board, okay, this is what you've got in each of the buildings, this is what the state is recommending. Are we presenting that information, and are you still going with what your individual 4 principals want to have in the budget? Are you guys as a board leading that discussion? Are you expecting the principals to lead the discussion?
Which budget are you talking about?
Your district budget.
So our individual district budgets?
Yeah.
So, from my perspective, I think that's an individual board decision, right? Not, I would think so.
But we're bringing it to you next month, so we wanted some feedback from those 4 members who were here.
Oh, okay.
Principals not communicating those types of needs, or no? Like the nursing needs?
They are. It's communicating with us as we say, okay, I'm going down and sitting with them and saying, this is who you got in your building now. Who do you want in your building next year?
Right.
I think we're looking for guidance on how you're doing that now across
How are you
2
getting
different
at
towns or
equity?
4 different towns.
How do you want us to be looking through the lens of equity and excellence and efficiency? All of them. Like, do you want us to continue to just look at it from the lens of the teacher or the principal saying this is the level that we need? Or are you wanting us to dig into the ratios with you and the principals to have those deeper conversations about?
Yeah, so,
overall
that. But it might take a little while to get there.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
But that's where we need to go, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we need to drive towards the equity piece, but I feel like we had such a bumpy road getting to like today that I don't want to go too fast.
Yeah.
Because I'm so excited we have this food service director, and now we're talking about these other director level positions, right? So, and which I think are great ideas. So I know there's changes coming, but let's not put 20 on the board for next fall.
So,
But we're gonna have you dig into the data, we're not suggesting that you're gonna make global changes.
Okay.
And I want us to work, and I think we'll work on this on Wednesday, about building our common understanding of what that word means.
Yeah.
Because equity doesn't necessarily mean equal.
Right, and I almost feel like if you get down to that level, it's definitely gonna take more work on our part and your part probably, but then we can make more informed explanations of this is why we have 2 of these here, this is why we have 1 of them here. I feel like if we get down to that, then we will be able to explain our fiscal decision. And then also maybe, which I feel I like the idea of what would you like to have, so that there's at least some kind of vision or goal worked into that budget a little bit, and then see what we could manage.
No.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
I also think that the smaller ticket item spending that can quickly amass to tens and tens of thousands of dollars, when I go through vouchers every week, other than having to turn my whole computer screen sideways to look at them, which is challenging, so I'm scrolling through, I'm seeing spending that I don't fully understand in some of the individual buildings. $1,000 here, $3,000 here, that is probably in discretionary budgets, but I'm wondering how are we tracking that, and is it okay to spend $1,500 on chocolate in one building, and why is that cost there, and $3,000 to a florist, and I for something in a building that I don't know, I don't understand where that $3,000 for the greenhouse is. And so I'm signing off on some of these things, and yeah, I mean, I think I texted Morgan, I'm just like, some of these things I don't, and so it's $1,000 here and it's $2,000 there, and now with it's very different than when I used to go in every Friday and I really understood what the spending was just for Montgomery, and now I'm trying to understand it in 3 other buildings, and I'm trusting that the principals are keeping kind of track of their individual budgets, but especially that discretionary spending doesn't fully seem equitable to me, and so I don't understand who's accounting for it. And then the deeper stuff of staffing and people resources also, like, how are we deciding which building has a math interventionist versus another building that doesn't have a math interventionist but potentially could use one? So why isn't that person there? I mean, I feel as though for me, I still have a long way to go to, like, kind of understand these nuances of this big merged budget. And this is mostly at NMV level, not at the SU level.
In terms of the staffing pieces and levels of support with the data that we're gonna bring you next month, you'll be able to see that through the lens of per pupil. So we're trying to connect it back to that. And then there's obviously other data that we'll have to look at behind that. If there are other reasons why, maybe it's a performance level issue. We have one school starting here and one school starting here, and that priority might be with the really beefing up the performance at one of the other schools. But I hear what you're saying. I also hear what you all are saying about, I think you have to go slow to go far. I think that's true. I think we have to open our eyes to our reality, though, so that we all kind of know where our starting place is. It's kind of like opening up our closets and let's all look in each other's closets and get a sense of what's hanging on the rack, is the way I'm thinking about this. So you may give us direction once we get into that data, and I think it would be a mistake for us to be making huge substantial shifts.
Yeah, so
quickly.
honestly, I'd like to look at both, because that gives me an idea of where we are and then where I think we need to go.
Both what, Rick?
Both ratios to that stuff, but also kind of the traditional building thing. I don't think that's a real,
Yeah.
because that would give me a better sense, I think, of some of what Mary's talking about, and also the.
Okay. The last thing I have is about the transportation study. So what we're thinking about is, now that we are in a merged system and we are about to next year be in a place where we need to negotiate our next transportation contract, it might make sense for us to engage with some outside entity to do a study of our transportation needs. We know that with the shifts around Act 46 and the Fairfield kids all going to Maple Run now, we have a bus that we're gonna be able to cut out for the Fairfield Run next year on the Enosburg-Richford side. We wonder if there are other efficiencies that we can find by doing a true route study, population study. Especially knowing now that almost 100% of the students in our 2 schools are from within our SU. So one of the things that we might want to think about if we were doing this transportation study is considering, what if you had students in Sheldon or Bakersfield that wanted to go to Richford? By looking at this transportation study, is there a way to open up that opportunity for us to provide transportation all the way in to the second high school? Because right now, there's only transportation to this high school, so.
And the timing, right? Like, so if a Bakersfield kid wanted to go to Richford and ride the bus,
that's what the study could help us.
but get there at like 10, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Maple Run did that, and they did manage to eliminate some routes, is my understanding.
I think it's
but
a
it
smart
was
thing.
not easy for all the principals, because there was you're gonna have to move your schedule 5 minutes earlier,
Oh,
5 minutes later
yeah,
to
yeah.
make this all happen.
None of this work is gonna be easy for you as board members or
Mm.
for our principals who are used to, their worry is about their own individual school. So we recognize that the shift is happening and the shift is hard.
But the transportation study, we don't just get to dump that off on the school bus company?
No.
Really?
No.
Oh. Don't they do all of our routes?
Yes, with a lot of input from us.
And Lynn, we are not required to, right, we're not required to provide busing, correct?
By statute, no, you are not.
Yeah, okay. No, I'm not at all
There's a big
advocating for
savings.
that,
Look,
no.
I was waiting for the.
There's
and.
more, yeah.
Yeah. So we would like to budget that in this next budget cycle, but if we get to later this spring and we think we have space for it in this budget year, we may try to push it in to this year because we think it's gonna be a lot of data and we're hoping that it can help us to move efficiently forward.
What's the cost of it?
Yeah, that's right.
It was around 7,000 for Maple Run when they did it.
And in the school, in the towns that have high school choice, does each town provide busing to all? Well, you said Bakersfield doesn't provide busing to Richford, but does to Enosburg.
No,
Enosburg runs the bus.
Right.
And BFA
Oh.
runs a bus to Fairfield that Bakersfield
But that's
kids
the
can
only bus
hop
they
on.
run. It used to be like.
Bakersfield does
Sheldon
not
Choice
ship
Town.
any high school kids anywhere. No,
None
well, I
of
don't
our
know,
sending
I can't-
towns
no sending
pay
towns
for high
do.
school transportation.
Oh, the
And
sending
the high
towns do.
school.
So,
No, none of our
Those
sending
are
towns do.
Some choice towns.
Just the
do pay
receiving
for
towns will run routes.
They want, the high schools want our
Okay.
children, so they say
so
we'll pay for a
Enosburg
bus.
covers
We don't really
that
want your
bus
kids, we
that
just want
takes
your
the
money.
Montgomery, takes the Montgomery kids to
Truth be told.
Enosburg. Richford covers the bus that takes the Montgomery kids to Richford, and North Country
Yes.
still.
But that's not
Operates
true,
that
because
bus.
some towns pay to send the bus. So for instance, like Sheldon paid for the bus to come to Maple Run. Like the town paid for it.
Yeah.
So there are some choice towns that pay, if enough kids will pay to
It
have
was
that
the
bus.
school, you know?
It wasn't the school that paid for a Sheldon bus.
I think it was, I thought it was the school and then they dropped it.
And we didn't run a bus to Georgia either. Well, in Albert, we don't pay for the Albert bus. I think Albert pays for that bus. We
No,
don't pay
also-
for any busing,
Some-
other than the Fairfield.
I think you guys pay for the, wasn't that what he was saying the other night at the meeting? Was that the, St. Albans pays for the bus to go to Alburg? That's why MVU, he was saying something about students going someplace because
Does
MVU
they send a
didn't.
bus?
MVU didn't send the bus, but somebody else did send the bus. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they were fighting over the tuition dollars.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't. There's towns. I remember the Fairfield bus, kids used to have to pay dollars as they got on the bus.
Yes, yes.
And that was paid, that was not a school bus.
So are you good with us adding that into the budget?
How much is it, just out of curiosity?
It was around
$7,000.
Oh, yeah.
I know, I was thinking like 26 or something. It's only 26,000.
Oh, thank God, Lynn.
Okay. Lynn, you're
Some
good,
kind of
eh?
big
That's good?
topics.
That was working.
We're big topics, but I only get you at this, the lump them all in.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next meeting, November 11th. Any other business to conduct tonight?
So anybody who needs the board contact form, I'll leave that on the table if you didn't get it at your local meeting.
I just have a question about the last meeting. What did you guys decide about, or talk about, unpaid leave? Or did you talk about
That
it?
yellow folder right there.
I'm
that I
working
gave
on it.
Mary,
Oh, okay.
She's gonna take a crack at
Yeah.
synthesizing that.
Good luck.
Nice.
Yeah, I will get back to you on it. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks all.